Hi everyone. So it's me. I'm back. Of course, I am in a different location. I'm still in like my house. Um, but I am doing uh, I think it's called like a book tag. I haven't been on for a while. I've had classes and stuff, so um, it was literally like the busiest semester. But that's beyond the point. But I am doing the book tag of the Orient Express. So, I was tagged by Joel Swagman. I I really hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly, considering I have followed you for quite a while. And of course, I'm doing like two other videos today as well, including a live stream. Um, and of course, each one I'm going to be here. Um, I also have my drink of choice, which today is different than normal. um, I have actually hot chocolate. It's not actually cold. Like, I am currently tearing down all my Christmas decorations, which are like you can see here, and if you can like see up here, you can see the shadows from what I have hanging from my ceiling. And I'm actually sitting in the spot where my tree once was. Um, but just to do a quick rundown before we get too far and excited. Um, Behind me is the bookshelf that I have been asking for like ever and a day. So the books that I know that I choose to be you know uh, in my book tag is going to be the first books that go into this bookshelf. I have spent most of this morning. It is currently like 8:30 in the afternoon. Um, but I'm hoping that this kind of becomes my new place to do my videos now that I'm not doing crazy time with classes and everything. So you guys are going to get to see me at the end of the video. Put them somewhere on here. The other two videos I'm going to do is once I publish this and this goes live, I'll probably spend a couple more. I'll probably wait about 30 minutes to an hour. And then all the books that used to be where I used to sit, which is on the other side of the room, they're going to be coming here. And my goal is, as I'm like putting them up, some of the more interesting books, um, I want to have you guys sit here and I'm going to talk about some of the books, some of my favorites and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, so we're gonna have, those two just like a catch up and, you know, as well as a live stream. The catch up I probably will be doing later today. I want to do that after I get my bookshelf set up and everything. Um, but of course, these are all recorded with the exception of my live stream. That one will not. Um, Currently, you guys are like on an end stand, so like I don't have any of this set up. Though the way that everything's gonna be set up for me in the future is gonna be so much easier than what it once was. Because you guys used to sit on a filing cabinet, and so once I get everything set up, it's gonna be so much easier and everything. Um, Really quick, yesterday was New Year's Eve, and today is New Year's Day. Yesterday, Betty White passed away. So that's the reason that I got this mug, because it has Betty White on it. It's my Golden Girls one. This shirt is also Golden Girls. I usually try to be very good and professional in my videos, but I was just like, it's a new year. I can have some fun, like first date. Plus, it's a holiday. Like if you're in the U.S., at least this is a holiday. So I decided today, just taking a break from tearing everything down. I have spent a little bit getting everything figured out. Whenever Joel tagged me in this, um, I went ahead and I started thinking about this and everything. So I was getting everything together, and then today I kind of have assembled everything. The Avengers of books, basically, for this book tag. But let's go ahead and get a drink, and we'll get started. Okay. So as we get started, I have not actually ever read the Murder on the Orient Express. I do have the movie, um, which of course I got because it has like three of my favorite actors currently, um, which are Johnny Depp, uh, then Michelle Pfeiffer, and Judi Dench, who are like to me like three of the biggest. Along with Joan Crawford, they are probably some of the best actors in my royal opinion. So I do have that. That's not going to go on the bookshelf. That's going to go in my shelf that has all my movies. Um, Funny fact, I have not read this either, or I have not watched this either. So, like most of the movies that are on my, movie shelf, they have not gotten any life. So that's for me the funny thing. Um, I am going to be using my phone, which I don't like using, um, just because I feel it's kind of unprofessional. But for this, because I didn't write any of this down, so we're very much free flow today. Um, so I do apologize if you guys do see me looking at it, but for the Orient Express, everything is on my phone. Um, so the first thing is Mrs. Hubbard. Um, so this is kind of like a multi-dimensional book or whatever. Um, so how I was thinking, of different things. So I was thinking, I actually have two stacks. I have the stack of books that I was like, yes, this is, good, whatever. But then the final selection. So the final selection is on the other side. But so the two books that was really thinking about, was in the running for multi-dimensional books were the Kite Runner and uh, I don't know. I think that these are like going to be in reversed, so I apologize. But the Kite Runner and As I Lay Dying, um, both of these are kind of interest to me. They were always interesting books, and I read these like way back in high school and everything. The Kite Runner is about a gentleman who leaves Afghanistan, with his family, but it tells the story of an Afghan refugee. About the time that the Afghan, nation fell to the Taliban, but it goes pretty much, it's his memoir as a fictional character. And then um, it takes us kind of like, we see his view, but then we also see his friend's view, as well as, in the end, what would be his friend's son. And of course, As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner is probably one of the more interesting classics. I do try to read classics along with not so much classic. Um, and for me, it was interesting reading that. If you are somebody that gets disoriented, while you read, I really recommend that you take your time when you read this because every chapter is written by somebody different, and so it's always interesting for me to read that. For me, especially because that's one of the things that I would like to write one day is a book that has multiple points of view. Um, so those two books really had me going. But who got the final piece was Station 11 by uh, Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book that uh, takes place as a global pandemic. Look at what we're in now. A global pandemic happens, and which is much deadlier than the current pandemic that we are in. But it wipes out a huge loss of the population. And so we kind of character hop. We have different perspectives and stuff like that. There's this kind of shift in, what's going on. And there's all these, like, there's so much in the book other than, understanding there's a pandemic. And then we're hopping around between points of view and characters. Um, and in the end, I felt that it was a very good nomination, especially just knowing um, how much of this book relates to especially current, situations, especially for um, areas that are seeing like high mortality rates and stuff like that. But there's, for me, it was awesome whenever I read it, and I really want to read it again sometime. Um, Simply just because when I read it, I kind of read it as a audio book because at the time I struggled with managing time. So most of my time was spent walking and listening to audiobooks. So that is, of course, my first classification. Um, for I know that this like section was a bit long, and I hope from here on out, since I kind of had to explain everything, that it's not going to be as long. So we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so the second um kind of subject or whatever is Colonel Arth Arthburnot. I don't know. Once again, I've not seen the movie, so I do apologize for everything that I butcher. Um, I'll probably have a dead cow, in the room before the end of this. Um, and so what the what the premise for this subject is a love affair or something in a novel. Um, so for me, whenever I was thinking about this, I was like, some good books that I've read about, that would be good examples of this. And for me, like I honestly, like I wasn't too sure whenever I was getting into this. So I like this one probably took me the longest to figure out who would be the uh final answer that I will give. But the books that I decided would be like kind of my runner-ups was Blue Angels, which is probably like for me one of the most fascinating things. It's like about a professor that has a love affair with his one of his students. And of course, for me, one of the uh, highlights of my college career, reading Lolita um, by Vladimir Nabokov. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, which is um, about a much older man who has this love affair with this young kid. Like, um, off the top of my head, I can't remember. I believe she's like 7 or 14. Like, she's in that age range, and like he falls in love with her, and like all this stuff happens with like him loving her. Like they run away, and you know it's absolutely disturbing, while at the same time it's almost one of my guilty pleasures. Like I always seem to run back to Lolita. Probably like top book that I've ever read. But the book that I actually chose, um which is kind of funny, is Pressure Head by J.L. Marrow. I believe that's how you pronounce their name. Um, and for me, this was interesting whenever I finally came to this conclusion. It's about a plumber that has these kind of mystical powers, that he has the ability that he can detect lost things. Um, Whenever I read this, like this was probably one of the first LGBTQ plus books I ever read. Um, and read it for kind of like pleasure. Like I didn't read it for like education or whatever. Um, but I was in probably like 10th, 11th, 12th grade, like around that age range. And it was so funny for me because he ends up, you know, having to work on a cold case with this guy who is his former bully from high school and everything. And there's this question of, how is this gonna, work out and everything like that. And, we end up seeing, the plumber and the investigator kind of like get a little hanky panky and stuff. So there's kind of like that situation, while at the same time there's this murder going on and there's somebody actively killing people. I think when I say it like that, it makes it sound like, there's a murder spree, but I think that there ends up being like three, people that die. But it's absolutely crazy. And it also, for me, when it comes to like love affairs, I'm not somebody that gets into like whenever I read Blue Angels, that was for like a class. So I really don't get into those kind of books like often. Um, Whenever I read fiction, I like for it to kind of be like interesting, which I think that you'll find with a lot of the other books that I ended up selecting. Also, like side note, I know that these are supposed to be fiction, and so I do apologize because I think like one of mine or two of mine are not going to be fiction, but at the same time I'm butchering a cow here, so it's quite all right. I think if I kind of slip out from underneath what I'm supposed to be doing. So okay, so the next subject is Miss Ratchettet, I think, or Miss Ratchet. Um, and that is a book that you love, or Mr. Ratchet, my bad, you know, but a book that you love to hate. So for me, whenever this book was very interesting selection, and I hope, like I pray that I don't end up getting in trouble because there's whenever I was going through, it was like, oh, what would be like good books? And the runner-ups for me are hilarious. Um, the one runner-up is George Orwell's 1984, um, which is for me, I just hate this book. But I love to hate it because it's this dystopian, thing, and it's, huge. Like, I know very few readers, you know, that do not know this book or have not at least had to have read it for a class or something. So for me, like that's where that book falls. The next one is the one that I'm like iffy about, so we'll see what happens. But it's this book, which I'm hoping you can see. Um, I have this kind of just because um I have like this weird side thing where I love World War II and some of the stuff that happened there. Um, like that's kind of for me what I find interesting. Um, and I shouldn't say that I love it because that makes it sound as if like I'm ooh ah, funky planet with it, and I'm not in any way. But for me, I do find interest in World War II and um this book, which I don't even want to say because I don't, want to end up being, getting in a huge amount of trouble. Um, but for me, this was always just an interesting book. And I mean, like, she's thick. Like, this is a thick book to try and read. Um, like, it's thicker than most Harry Potter novels. Um, and for me, it was always just interesting because in many ways, we forget about, these manifestos that people write. And so then for me, it's just like, well, it's important. Like, if these crazy people or these people that do horrible things, their manifestos oftentimes line things out and stuff like that. So there's this deep, wealth for me of knowledge that exists here. And I'm like, yes, I want to understand what makes somebody become a horrible villain. While at the same time, it is literally the slowest book. It is a horrible, horrible book. And in the end, it is the book, that says, how, millions of people throughout Europe, end up dying. Millions of people throughout, Asia and the Pacific end up dying. You know, and the entire world pretty much becomes encapsulated by this war and behind this one man that pretty much is able to spark everything. Um, but the book that I actually chose is a lot happier. It is Mildred Pierce by James M. Cain. So this I actually had to read for a class. And for me, like I have watched Mildred Pierce with Joan Crawford. I love Joan Crawford, and which if you've watched the series before, you know that. But for me, reading Mildred Pierce, we find, this mother who does everything for her daughter, goes above and beyond. and basically spoils her child to the point that her child feels like it's okay to murder somebody. And for me, it's absolutely fascinating. While at the same time, I'm like, if Mildred Pierce wasn't in it, because it's one of those books where you look at the character. Oh, that's my phone. You look at the character and you're like, what are you doing? Like, and I remember watching the movie and I'm like, Joe, what are you doing? Like, you're smarter than this. You, and for me it was always hilarious. And so I think that if it wouldn't have been tied in with the movie in my head, um, I would have been totally in the opposite direction. But it's hilarious, when we see Joan Crawford and her daughter, have this relationship, and you kind of see like this kid is so spoiled, and eventually Joan does hit the point where she's like, nope, you're done, get like out. And we end up seeing her then bring her daughter back and everything else, but then her daughter just like goes off and kills somebody. And so there's this thing where you're just like, those parents, where you just want to shake them because you're just like, what is wrong with you? You are going to cause your kid to become a horrible person or whatever. So for me, that's like a book that I love to hate. Okay, so the next one, I know I'm gonna butcher this name, but it is the Princess Dragonomorph. Let's hope that I didn't kill that name too bad. And it is a book that has been moldering on your bookshelves for a while. For me, this one was so it was hard just because there's so many books that I currently have on my bookshelf that I need to read. Um, and for me, like the two books that I chose were Dumpling by Julie Murphy, um, which is also like on Netflix. I haven't seen either or, and I want to. I want to definitely watch the Netflix thing, but I don't want to watch that until I read this. And it's about this plus size girl that, you know, um, tries to be um, that she wants to be a model or and stuff like that. Um, the other one is Six Amendments, um, how and why we should change the Constitution. This is by John Paul Stevens, the late Supreme Court Justice. Um, and this is like one of those that it's just like, for me, I'm always interested, especially in government and history, where I'm like, okay, I want to understand stuff. And this book for me just is fascinating because I look at it and I want to be like, yeah, okay, like, um, I wonder if I can quickly find the thing about the Six Amendments that he's saying about. Um, yeah, there's the political gerrymandering, the campaign finance, sovereign immunity, the death penalty, the Second Amendment and gun control, and anti-commandering rule. Uh, so those are like the six that he is talking about. And for me, it's like, especially somebody that's on the Supreme Court, it's absolutely fascinating. And here in the United States, the Supreme Court has a whole lot of power. So to understand that is big. Like you need to understand all that. Um, but the book that I ended up choosing was Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I actually have started this every once in a while. Like you can actually see my things that I have in it. That I'd pick it up and I read a couple chapters and I put down. And I think that that's the dangerous thing about this book is that I can pick it up, I read it for a little bit, and then I'm just like, no, I'm good. Go fish. And um, it's all about, and this is, of course, a memoir, I believe, is what it would be called. Um, of, Elizabeth's story where she goes to Italy, India, and Indonesia, um, kind of like to reground herself and everything. And for me, it was, it's interesting and fascinating to read. Like, I think um, I'm almost out of Italy, um, which is where she devotes much of her life to eating and kind of giving into pleasure and stuff like that. Um, and the other two parts is really where she gets into grounding herself and finding, inspiration, which is India. And then when she goes to Indonesia, which is where she finds love and this, that, and the other, and whatever. And it was kind of one of those books that I got into when I was younger, just because I was like, "Oh, this is interesting. This is fascinating." And then I was just like, "Nah." And of course, as I developed as a reader, I definitely felt, I don't know, like I just fell out of it. And eventually I'll hop into it. Probably the rest of the book will be how it's been for the last five, well, it's been longer than that, probably 9 years that I started reading it, where it's just like, oh, we read a couple chapters, we put it down. We read a couple chapters, we put it down. So that's kind of where I am with this book. And I very much recommend it if you are one of those that are just like self-improvement, blah, 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 blah. Like that's pretty much what it was marketed as. Um, but it's definitely, like I said, it's a good book that I would say what was I was always told you should always have like in your bag or something like that if you're traveling or you have a busy life. You should have a pocketbook, or a purse book, whatever, and you always have it in there. And then like you're at a doctor's office or you're waiting for your flight, you can pull out a book, and there's 3 pages, 4 pages, 12 pages a chapter, and you can read it, be done, and oh, time to go to your appointment, whatever. That's what I would recommend this book as. I wouldn't recommend it as a book that you sit down and try to get a wealth of knowledge or something from. But that's kind of how I stand with that book. um so it probably will be on my to read list for a long time. Okay. So the next thing is Beddoes, a book with a main character in service. This one was interesting because I had to think about, books that I had about service and what it looked about. Honestly, whenever I first thought about it, I'm gonna stop shaking the camera. When I actually thought about it, I was just like, oh, it's like war or whatever, that kind of service. And then like as I was getting into both Joel's, thing, as well as the bookworm who originally created this uh book tag, I was just like, oh, that's not how it's supposed to be. Instead, it's supposed to be like a character that is in, you know, service to another person and stuff like that. My runner-ups were interesting. Um, and the one was The Bondwoman's Narrative, which was by Henry Louis Gates Jr., was who kind of like did the editing for this book at least. But the original author was Hannah Crafts. Um, and it's kind of her story about how, or it's really just a novel, not really her story, but it's a novel about a escaped slave and her story, as a slave and her escape into freedom. The other one was Apex Hides the Hurt by a um, Carson Whitehead, or yeah, so it's not Carson, it's Colson. I apologize. Once again, I butcher names. Um, but for that book, he is hired by a town to rename the town, and like all this stuff is going on. While at the same time, there's kind of this like history about, band-aids and stuff like that. Like there's so much that's going on. And it's, for me, it's a delight. Like I remember whenever I read it, and I was just like, there's so much drama and stuff that's going on. And um so the main investigator, which I don't remember, I want to say that we never find out what his name is. I don't remember his name, which does not say anything. I'm well known for not remembering, especially books that have been so long since I last read them. And so his service is basically, he's dealing with, a whole bunch of stuff in his personal life, while at the same time he has to like figure out, okay, what do we name this town? Blah 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 blah. And it's a very good book for cultural appropriation, a good book about, um, especially now where we are in this time and age where it's just like, okay, what is, the real history and stuff like that. And that's what the main character does. He spends a lot of his time going about, figuring out what's the real history about this town and stuff like that. So those were the runner-ups. Who won the nomination for this? I actually picked Whip Smart. Once again, it's not a novel and everything like that, but I felt that it was like a good um book to depict, service and stuff like that. And for like a weird reason. Um and for me, like if you've not read the book Whip Smart by Melissa Fabios, I believe. It's Febos. I'll also have like the um finalists and then like the nominees or runner-ups or whatever. Um, whatever in the description down below. So what this is about is literally Melissa's life whenever she was a I'm trying to think of what they're called. Um, she wasn't a sex worker, but she ran in a dungeon, like a BDSM dungeon. I guess that's what it's called. And her story, like what it was like for her to go through all of that. And for me, it was fascinating reading that book. Um, just because it was far away from anything I have ever been exposed to, anything that I know remotely anything about. And for me, it was very fascinating to read, um, as uh, somebody that is very distant, connected. And it's especially in my area of expertise, um, when it comes to, I guess, like reading and stuff like that. Like I've never thought about like, stuff like, we have stuff like Lolita, stuff like that that I've read. Um, the so for me it was like there's that, but then there's stuff like Whip Smart where there's, a dominatrix, I guess that's what they're called. Um, that kind of do all these things and but yet they're serving these people and it's even more fascinating because Melissa gets into this stuff of, why she's here for these people and what they, they're businessmen and stuff like that and people of power that they're just like but they want these situations for different reasons and stuff like that. And it ranges all the way from they just want to have, a female companion that is going to do, the chains and whips and scary things. Um, that just because that's what they're into or that's kind of their like secret pleasure all the way to men that just want to dress up as women and like everything in between. And for me, it was fascinating to read, and but that's kind of my take on it. Okay, so the next question is probably going to be the easiest, I guess, simply because it is the train itself. Another book that features this train. I literally skimmed through all of the books that I have here at the house and thought a lot about even if I have a book in storage, I don't think there's really any book that has any mention about the Orient Express, or talks about it. I don't even think that there's really any books that I have that talk about trains. Um, so for me, like I guess that honestly, you kind of have to, call foul, deduct 20 points from my grade or whatever. And, I'm sorry, I don't have anything for this. So that means that I get to kind of move on to the next subject, that I have, which is a snowstorm, a book that features a snowstorm or characters stuck in weather conditions. Um, for me, I kind of took this for two meanings. Um, I really didn't have any books, kind of like the last one, that had anything that really stuck out. So, the one that I picked for a runner-up is Don't Call Us Dead by Denez Smith, which is a book of poetry. So there's, I kind of snuck in that there is just like some of the poems, were about, storms or whatever, stuff like that. And life. And so there's kind of like the psychological storms and whatever. The other one was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I did a video on that too, um, which is fascinating. I definitely recommend that you go back and watch that. Um, and I might some of the videos from last year. I don't think were as good as they probably could have been. Um, some of it comes down to I don't have good editing. I don't know how to edit. I am quite dumb when it comes to that world. Um, so there's like kind of a snowstorm in that. Um, but the book that I actually chose is absolutely phenomenal. Um, though if you have a weak stomach, do not read it. But it is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, I believe is how you say their last name. And this is a book that has oh, found one of my bookmarks. Um uh and it's once again a post-apocalyptic world, and it's this father and son duo that are, out in the world. They're trying to make stuff happen, or not make stuff happen, but they're trying to survive. And this book, there's cannibalism, there's whole bunches of crazy stuff. Basically, it is a true post-apocalyptic world. And there's, I believe it takes place in the winter, and the father, is trying to make sure that his kid survives and all this stuff. Um, but so it is a truly sad story, but it's, you know, probably one of the best things that I could find that fits, the snowstorm or kind of like stuck in the weather genre. Um, but it was very fascinating to me. So, and then the last thing is the category of Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist anymore, um, but choose a nonfiction book about Yugoslavia or a novel set in a Slavic country. This was difficult for me just because, once again, it goes back to the train thing. I don't have any books that are really takes place in Yugoslavia or really in any Slavic countries. Um, and I looked online and I was like, okay, what move, or what books, you know, could take place. So I was like, what countries? There's like Russia, the Baltics. Um, so there's like this kind of there's kind of like this idea of okay, trying to find something, and I sadly wasn't really able to. I kind of found a book that I was like, that's close enough. Like that's I may not have the light bulb tight, but it's on. Like I at least have a light on. And that's Camilla, which takes place in Austria. Um, Camilla is by trying to find it. Camilla is by Joseph Schroding the Few, I think is um like I I I do try. Like I try with these names. So um but it takes place in Austria. I think it takes place in Austria-Hungary. I don't remember the exact location. And this is like one of those books that I also want to do a video on because it's for me it's fascinating and I love it. But um yeah, so that's kind of um this entire video for me. I once again I do apologize because I know that some of these um books, they're supposed to be novels, and stuff like that. I two of them ended up being memoirs, and the other ones were novels. Plus, I didn't even have a book, so I I ended up getting like a whole bunch of points deducted. So, but I guess the other thing is tagging somebody. Now, I assume that Joel is also going to see this, and I do apologize, Joel, because I think that you're really the only other person that I know, at least right now, that watches my content or comments on my stuff. So for me, I do apologize because you're kind of like the only one, and I watch kind of other booktubers, but it's not, I don't know, like for me, like it's weird. Like this is the first like book tag I've ever done, so um I do apologize, and I'm as time goes on, and we see how things go. Um, but I do thank you, Joel. You at least have been keeping me up to date. I'm gonna link Joel's page down below to anybody else that watches this video. Simply just because it's like his page is really interesting. I find interest in his stuff. He kind of does similar stuff to what I do, though his is less academic, when it comes to his book reviews and stuff like that. Mine is oftentimes I like read a book like uh the one that I'm gonna do for Station 11. Like I read a couple papers, and journal stuff on it, and so it's just like, oh, cool stuff. Um, and of course it's gonna kind of suck when I graduate because I'm not gonna have the access to some of the databases and stuff as I would, once I graduate. Um, so we're gonna see about that. Like I do want to keep up, this, especially once I graduate and I'm gonna have less, time that's gonna be consumed by my academic career and more time that's gonna be open to stuff like this. Um, so yeah, I do appreciate this. So the tag part, once again, I don't really know about that. And of course, if you want to, of course, do this book tag, yourself. I'm gonna link that in the description below. This video has gone far too long, so I'm gonna just go ahead and sign off here by putting my drink back. But I'm gonna slide over a little bit, and you guys are gonna be able to see me put these books and have them be the first book in my collection on here, which you kind of can't see. That's the other thing. Whenever I get everything set up, I want to have a better light to that little shine in here. So, uh, I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season, and I hope that you guys have a happy new year, and that I would do that too. I hope you have a wonderful new year, and peace, love, and joy follow you, and have a great day.